Welcome everyone to our Utah League of Cities and Towns Board of Directors meeting. It is October 16th and it is 9:35. Do we want to go around and do introductions quickly?
Yeah, just of board members.
Okay, board members, sure. I'll start here and then I'll go to Mayor Silvestrini. I'm Mayor Michelle Calusi of Provo, and go ahead, Mayor.
Jeff Silvestrini from Mill Creek.
Seth Parent, Spanish Fork.
Mary Malkovich, City of Woodland Hills.
Oh, it's me.
Jessica Eckert, Mapleton City Council.
Dan Davis, Salt Lake City.
All right, let's go. Can we call them out online?
Yes, I'll just go ahead and read everyone we have on here. We have Mayor Danya Jessup of Hilldale. We have Mayor Mickey Wright of Torrey. We have Mayor Dirk Burton of West Jordan, as these things move around on me. We have Mayor Mark Johnson of Lehigh. Mayor Mark Shepherd of Clearfield. Councilmember Mary B. Rich of Manti. Mayor Michelle Randall of St. George. Councilmember Scott Phillips of Cedar Hills, and Councilmember Tony McKay of River. Yes.
I hope that all of the central southern Utah folks had survived the eclipse.
We survived. This is Scott Phillips. I'm from Cedar City, not Cedar Hills.
Oh, I'm sorry. I knew that.
You're south, just a
Yes.
little. Well, welcome everybody. We're happy that you're able to join us and again appreciate that you took the time to even jump on Zoom. It makes a difference to have you here. Let's go ahead and move to item number 2, which is the administrative items. Let's look for approval on the minutes. Okay, we have a motion on the table and a second. Any discussion on the minutes from our last meeting? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. All right, just a reminder for everybody, in your packets, as usual, is our conflict of interest. If you haven't done it, here it is. This is what it looks like. Please make sure you get that done and turned in. We'd really appreciate it. Okay, item number 3 is our fiscal year 2024 Q1 budget report. And Nick, I think you're going to take this one.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Attached, you will find our Q1 budget report. And why don't I just give that a share for everyone to see. So this is Q1 has just wrapped up at the end of September. The largest thing I want to point out before we get into these numbers, you'll see that in the first paragraph, is that when I reference dues are X% of our budget, I'm referring to what we're calling our core budget, which is our budget without the local administrative advisor grant in there. You'll notice when we approved the first budget, the last line items we have are total expenses and total revenue without the state appropriation, and then total expenses and total revenue to include those. That grant would be from our core budget to the budget with the grant is like a 40% increase. So if I were to tell you what percentage our dues make up of the budget with the grant included, it wouldn't be realistic. It would seem a lot smaller than what it really is from our core budget. So as I go through here, know that the local administrative advisor grant is removed from those percentages, but it is referenced in here as well. So at the end of this quarter, we have over 73% of our core revenue collected. And with dues, we have about 91% of that collected as well. Now, in the month of October, we've received more dues, so we're actually over. We're still missing a couple small towns, but we are over 100% of our dues right now. But at the end of the quarter, we were at about 91%. Sponsor revenue is about 60%, which means we're right on track for the year. And we explain how our sponsor revenue is collected. The half from the previous fiscal year goes into this year, and then half that we collect this year goes into next fiscal year. That's because our sponsorships are done on a calendar year, because that's what most of the private entities that we're dealing with the sponsorships use. And we have to do it on our fiscal year, and that's how the auditors have asked us to do that. Registration fees are about 14% of our budget, and so far we've received 46% of that. Now that is lower than what we were expecting. So we don't expect to be at the full 545,000 at the end of this year. However, annual costs a little less than we were budgeting for as well, so we don't think that shortfall in revenue will affect any decisions that we have to make on our conferences, our upcoming events, local officials day, and media. Though the registration fees were down a little bit, the exhibit fees were higher than expected. We expanded the exhibit hall in the Salt Palace, so we should be over 100% at year's end in exhibits. Grants and special projects include Your Land, Your Plan, and the final amount of the funding we have from the ARPA assessments. And that revenue is recognized once we make the expenditure, because we've already collected that revenue. So you'll see that those two tie in revenue. Now, the local administrative advisor grant, I talked a little bit about that being removed from these percentages that I'm referencing, but it is a cool new major program that we're starting this fiscal year. That comes from a $1.58 million grant from GOPB, from a legislative appropriation. And we received 90% of that. Now, the way that grant is working is we get 90%, and then when we submit the final report, we'll get the final 10%. We are sub-granting the vast majority of that to the 7 AOGs in the state. So a vast majority of that is pass-through funds, and that's another reason why we don't necessarily want to think of it as our core budget. We have the same rules for the AOGs that the state has for us. So we have sub-granted 90% of what each AOG receives already, and you'll see those expenditures there. And then once they submit the reports to us, then we need to submit to the state, then we'll submit the final 10% to them.
Matthew, when will the AOGs then distribute that funding or is it already started that they're going out?
It's already started, and each EOG is in kind of a different position as far as where they're at. Some hired July 1 before money had even gotten to us, let alone gotten to them. And some waited until we had signed an MOU to get hiring, but that is up and rolling now. Each AOG besides two, Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, have hired. How many AOGs have hired already?
All of them except for two.
For two,
Yep.
okay. Yep, and they're working on that. The job postings are out for that as well right now. And that is for them to hire an FTE who will serve as a local administrative advisor in their AOG. So all the communities, there are about a little over 140 in the state that don't have a full-time experienced administrator. They're eligible for this program and can reach out to the AOG to have their LAA start working on projects for them. Any other questions about the local administrative advisor program? Great. Moving on to expenditures. Right now, we are just over 27% of what was budgeted for the fiscal year. Now we are at 25% of the year being expended, so we're a little higher than that, but that is to be expected. We're not running ahead too far because the annual convention is significantly more expensive than our other events. So you'll look, when we get to events, we're at about 50% expended there. So that makes total sense to us. Personnel accounts for about 47% of our core budget, and we spent 22.4% of that, so you can see we're a little under there. Operating and program expenses is about 17% of our budget. We've only spent 12% there, so we're still running pretty slim in the first quarter on our operating expenses. Events make up just over a quarter, 26.5% of our budget, and we spent about 50% in that category, which makes total sense to us, considering annual costs more than the rest. I did mention the grants and special projects in revenue. As far as spending that, the 2021 ARPA assistance assessment, we still have some funding there, so that's continuing to partially fund a policy analyst position through the end of this year. And Your Land, Your Plan, we're in the second year of that grant. We've already started spending for this year on that, trying to create an online learning portal so that folks can learn about public real estate asset management through that portal. So those are some of the things going on in grants and special projects. I think I touched on everything we have to say about the local administrative advisor grant. That money is flowing. And overall, we are looking at $1,838,007 revenue over expenditures of our core budget. You can see those two bottom lines that we have on there to see where it is with the local administrative advisor grant. But we're exactly where, we expect to be, and things are looking really good. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the budget report that you have. You'll also see that I have attached the Q1 check register for your approval. And if you have any questions about any of the specific expenses on there, I'm happy to run back to Angela's office, grab the documentation, and let you know what we have there.
Local administrative advisor is a grant. Do we anticipate that after this grant period, that it will be reviewed and to be an ongoing expense in the state?
So it will be reviewed every year, and it already is an ongoing. It's an ongoing appropriation that was made. Now, it doesn't mean that that can't be taken away in the future. But yes, it's set up for ongoing. We'll review every year with GOPB to keep that going.
Nick, a quick question. In the history, as we collect revenue from membership dues, what do you typically see in terms of the cycle of revenue coming in? The bills due at the beginning of the fiscal year. Do you see them trickle in throughout? Do you kind of hit an end when you stop seeing those coming in?
We do, and we're about there. We do see it trickle in. Usually what we run into is a handful of very small towns that we're constantly trying to get a hold of, who may have their hours, from 1 to 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays and that sort of thing. And usually it is a communication issue, trying to get those stragglers in, and not a determination that they don't want to pay dues. We do have one small town from last year that determined not to be a member of the league. And then how many more do we have there? 4 we're waiting on?
We're hearing on 3.
Great. So we're waiting on 3 small towns to do that. But yeah, typically we see it all, we'll see that come in before, because we send them out before. We'll see a bunch come in before the fiscal year starts. Then we'll see a peak right after July 1, when everyone waited, said this is for the next fiscal year, I'll cut my check now. And then we'll do some follow-up leading up to the annual convention, because that's when the final due date is September 1st. And if anyone wants to participate in the convention or be on the board or anything, they have to be a dues paying member. And then after that spike in September is when we do the little bit of follow-up. And I think maybe a month ago, we had like 12, and then we had to send another thing out, and now we're down to 3. So that's basically kind of what it looks like. Great, Councilmember Phillips.
Yes, I'm just wondering if the registration fee decline, was that anything due to the change of date of our annual convention? Because it was about a month earlier this year.
Yes, I think so. I do think being on that Labor Day holiday did make it a little harder for some folks to take that time off. We are on that date again for 2024, fiscal year 25. So we will be dealing with that. We knew that would be a possibility going into it, but that was in our time frame of September through October of when we could hold the annual convention. That's what the Salt Palace had for us, so that we were kind of stuck on that. But yeah, I do think that was a contributing factor to that. Also, when we budgeted for it, last year was a record-breaking year for both mid-year and annual as far as attendance goes. And we may have been just a little too hopeful, thinking that would just break a record every year. But yeah, we did decline slightly. It was on par. It was comparable to the average that we have at annual, but just a bit lower than the record we broke last year.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you, Scott. Any other questions or concerns? All right, this is an action item to accept the budget, and then do you want to add in the other piece as well, or are they separate votes, or do we even need to do the second one?
They do need to do it, but they can be one motion. The report, the budget report, and the Q1 check register.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the Q1 budget report for 2024 and also the Q1 check register. Second.
okay, we got
Second motion.
so many seconds. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call it to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, our engagement report. This will be done by Molly Wheeler, our Deputy Director.
Hello, excellent. So First is an update on our training for our newly elected officials. As we have discussed previously, the delay of the election and the earlier start date for the session, the earliest the session can start, has us in a pretty shortened window to be able to train our newly elected. And so that time frame, in addition to some other constraints and lead goals, has kind of given us the opportunity to shift how we are doing our training for our newly elected officials. So we're breaking it out into 3 parts. The first will be a crash course that's similar to what we've done in the past for those Saturday events. However, there will just be 2. There will be 1 online and there will be 1 in person at the trust. And so instead of the league staff going out everywhere and doing it all on one Saturday, we're going to kind of simplify it and get that basic crash course done.
Which one's in person?
Yep, so December 9th will be in person at the local government trust in North Salt Lake. And the online will be on December 16th. Your board packet says the 12th. I apologize for that. So that will be the following Saturday, and that will be online. That again will just be the most kind of basics that newly electeds need before they take office in January. So we'll be discussing ethics, OPMA, grandma, basics of budgeting, and just like the most basics of land use. And so that will be there. This one is really focused. We're trying to really focus the marketing for those newly electeds for this one. Obviously, everyone's welcome, but we want to make sure that our newly electeds are there. From there, we're going to branch out into kind of some elected official essentials. And so that will include 3 webinars leading up to the legislative session to try to make sure that our newly electeds, but also anyone who else that wants, can be there. So we'll have a webinar on land use, digging a little bit more into that on this January 4th. Then we will also have 2 on the legislative session. One will be focused on the very basics, like how a bill becomes a law, how to follow along the legislative session, anything like that. The second will be kind of the league and how to engage with the league. What are the big issues we're looking at, everything like that. Then we will make it through and survive the session. And following that, we'll be doing some in-person regional trainings and events. And that will, I think, foster kind of 3 purposes for us. One, since we're not all going out this December and meeting our newly electeds, it'll give us a chance to go out and meet with all of them in a bit of a more relaxed setting where we can actually spend time with them and not just be rushed and frantic. It will give us a chance to get out with the LAA program and meet with the cities that are doing that. And then additionally, because annual will be shortened moving forward, it gives us a chance to kind of take that half day of training and league time. And instead of having everyone come to Salt Lake, we're going to go out to everyone. And so we're working with the AOGs and getting that on the calendar. And we're excited for that. So that's kind of what we're looking at now for our elected officials.
So you're going to coordinate these regional trainings through the AOGs,
Through the AOGs.
and then in that area, all of the cities who want to participate will go wherever they decide.
Yes, and so we've done this a few times with 6 County. So they do a big evening event. They usually run from like 5:30 to 9, and there's a big dinner with everyone, and then there's different workshops and trainings. So we're looking at something like that. Some AOGs have regional events that will, again, like 6 County, continue to collaborate with. Some are going to build it from scratch, and so it's really just going to vary as to what it looks like for each AOG to make sure that our biggest priority is to get an event where everyone comes. And so, for example, UNC Basin has like a big kind of like picnic in the park they do. So we're going to go to that and figure out how we can collaborate on that, you know, since everyone's already there.
And you'll let us know the dates on
We
that.
will let you know the dates on those.
And Molly, will the dates for so I can send my city council members to our website, they'll be there and all the
Yeah,
information.
we are working on getting like all of the EOE dates up. So that should hopefully be done by the end of the week.
Okay.
Yep. And then folks can go and they can register and do whatever they need with that.
I'm just gonna tell you, thank you for doing the webinars. I'm gonna watch them.
Yeah.
There's so much that I think I requested Cam to just constantly keep repeating and training, and I think I called it ULCT for Dummies, so I like that you've taken that name out and changed it to webinars, professional, but I think the new and us that have been in it for years and years, it's just always nice to have a refresher course on what our abilities and acronyms and everything that comes along with this.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I hope that also by kind of spreading it out, it is actually more impactful and helpful, right? Like going into a one-day training and learning everything you need to know isn't really an effective way to learn. And so hopefully by breaking it out and kind of having some trainings before you take office and after you take office, you'll, our newly elected will kind of have some time in and some more experience and be able to like ask more informed questions, be like, we ran into this specific problem, can you help us with that? So I think it'll be more helpful once they have some like actual applied use with some of those as well. Are there any more questions on EOE or any of the rest of the training? All right. Then I'll hop down. So for our other events, Local Officials Day, we wanted to chat with the board about that a little bit. Local Officials Day is our biggest single day event that we do as a league. It's the second day of the session. We bring up between 500 and 600 youth council members to the Capitol from about 50 to 60 different cities and towns across the state. It is a really fun time for them to be able to be at the Capitol, interact with their legislators. But we are also running into some very real constraints with that event. Specifically, while the Capitol is a beautiful facility and one that everyone loves to go to, where the legislature is, it cannot hold the events that we plan. Not well. So our biggest constraint is that, as I mentioned, we have between 500 and 600 youth council members. So that's just the students that come. That isn't the advisors or even the electeds who join us. The max capacity for the rotunda is 320. When we look at our breakout rooms, it's broken down to we can accommodate a max of 240. And so at any given time, our facilities can really only hold about 35 to 45% of the students we have there. In the past, we've tried to overcome this by creating a dual track. So we'll have some students in the breakout rooms and some students in the rotunda. However, we have found this to be quite
Maura.
challenging and somewhat
What you were referring to.
So recorded folks are a little confused about where they go. Some people just kind of go wherever they want, and so it makes it really challenging. Especially for the breakfast, everyone is there, and we've had a lot of instances where we have youth council sitting on the floor, really nowhere for them to go, and that's something that we would like to avoid. We want to make sure that we have a place for everyone who's there. So as we staff and kind of reviewing the constraints we have and what can be overcome and what can't, we've kind of arrived at two possible avenues, and we wanted board feedback on those. Option one is that we limit the attendance to the capacity that we can handle. So we would offer enough space for about 320 students to join. That would mean that we're probably limiting each youth council to about 5 members. And with that, then having like a waiting list and having people come in, but making sure that the event is tailored to a way that the students who come all have a place at that event. And we can kind of maintain all the programming that we have with that. The second is to continue as we have operated with no capacity restrictions and essentially take out all of the structure at the Capitol so that we're not asking anyone to be anywhere. That would make it a lot more self-directed for the youth councils. But essentially what that would look like is instead of having, the program in the rotunda or the breakout sessions in the different rooms, we essentially say, welcome, breakfast is in the rotunda. Here's a variety of activities you can do at the Capitol. You can go on a scavenger hunt. You can get a tour from the docent. We've talked about getting like some photographers there who can take pictures of the youth councils, like on the steps, or even like some professional headshots of the students, so that they can kind of have those as a memento for the event. And mind you, this is all specifically for the Capitol portion of the event. The Salt Palace would remain the same. So the lunch would remain the same. Having a speaker would remain the same for them. It's really just that Capitol that we're really, really limited by. And so we see, benefits to both. If we really want to make sure that we're providing that for programming, then we probably need to limit the number of students. If we do want it to be, we get as many students there as we possibly can. We probably need to take away some of the other kind of constrictions and let those 500 to 600 students move about freely. As staff, we like the idea of being able to, you know, have as many students who want to come attend. But we also then recognize that that takes away the mock trials, it takes away the activities. And so we wanted to hear from you as to what is most valuable for your youth councils. You know, would you prefer to bring fewer students and have them have a really structured time of programming, or would you rather bring as many students as you can and it's a bit more of a you know, self-directed experience at the Capitol?
So is it possible to shorten the time at the Capitol and to move to the Salt Palace earlier? I know we pay for that, but, and do more programming at the Salt Palace because there's more room there? Is that something that you looked at, or is it feasible?
Yeah, Katie, do you
Yeah,
have-
we can. We do have the Salt Palace all day, so it is available for us to go in earlier and we can start it short.
Because, you know, I don't know, I lean toward allowing anybody who wants to come, because I think that's great. And we're talking about almost doubling the participants, which I think is important. And then I do like some of the programming in the past has been awesome. Like the flag thing was great. And I think you can see around our state, a number of cities are changing their flags in response to that input. So those kinds of things are great. And we move the programming and stuff to do it. Because I think those sessions, you know, are valuable too for them, you know. And admittedly, it's not with the marble, but at least if we did that for part of it.
I feel the same way, but I think it just goes to what the mission and purpose is of this event overall. Is the purpose to engage the next generation of people who are going to be involved, in which case you don't want to constrain it, right? So I think you found kind of a happy medium. Can we sustain the programming, but also have some flexibility and give the exposure to the Capitol environment, the panache that comes with that. So I kind of love that. I would hate to limit it also.
I think one thing that we have considered as staff is that we also have very real staff constraints with this event. And I think there needs to be, and I don't know the answer, but we probably need to have some consideration of can our staff get to the Salt Palace in time to facilitate those?
And maybe the board could help.
Yeah.
Yeah, the board
And so-
could help.
Yeah, so, you know,
Help.
is that a thing of, you know, would the board be willing to potentially help facilitate some of these?
And I also think, so what I think I heard you saying, Mayor, was maybe come initially at the Capitol, have their breakfast, do a tour, do the pictures on the steps, and then transport them over for all the programming at the convention center. And at the same time, utilizing the board here to help facilitate the Capitol part and getting them on those buses to get back over so that it's timely for them to get to the Salt Palace for the programming. Then is that what we're thinking? Also, maybe some of the older students, the seniors who have already come 2 or 3 years to this event would be willing to help facilitate that morning and see themselves in kind of an elevated role because they've already been there a few times.
Yeah, the only trick on this is working in time for them to spend time with their legislators. But I mean, and we've done that successfully at the lunch,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe that's still the best time, you know, to the extent that there's business going on in the legislature, that it can be hard for that to happen in the Capitol anyway. But there have been people that have come down and sat at tables in the rotunda too. I don't know.
We have a hand here for Seth and then Mayor Walker.
I'm sorry.
No, you're great. Just keep jumping in. We'll just work around you.
I handle that for you anyway. I'll always go after you. I think it's worth noting and congratulating all the cities in the league on this problem. Thinking back 10 years, we didn't have quite this many kids coming, and I think there's been an elevation of importance and opportunity. So I think this is a fantastic problem to have. In Spanish Fork, 10 years ago, we created some criteria and made it so you had to be X, Y, and Z in order to go. And I think we allowed 10 or 12 kids to go. And some time ago, we eliminated that and had all that wanted to come. And it's enhanced our program in Spanish Fork. We have better kids participating in our youth council program than ever before. So I like the idea of keeping the no capacity. I don't really know that it's necessarily what you're asking right now for us to tell you how to formalize the program, but at this moment, give you that direction of, we like, at least what I'm hearing, we like seeing more kids. So how can we facilitate that to happen? And again, adding, I'll be available if you want as a board member, in this place or that place. I've never scheduled the day like that, but I can, if that's helpful for augmenting the league staff in a way. And quite frankly, if you want a few more from our cities to do that, I think we could bring, the right people, not just anybody who works with kids, but finding the right individuals that could be helpful. So let us know if there's a way you see our staff could augment you guys.
I've got 110 of them, so, of 500.
I mean, all your kids out of your city.
But what we do is, we have a service hours criteria to be able to do some of those things, but I don't want to limit it either because it's the next generation. When I go back and talk to the youth council, two of the things they've mentioned to me that I want to make sure we keep doing is the debating a bill. That was super important for them. They enjoyed it thoroughly. It was I think last year was a cell phone in the classroom or something. But I mean, every kid in my group said it was really interesting to see both sides of argument. I think we should do a tour of the Capitol and do all the programming at the Salt Palace, run the bills, get the legislators to come over there maybe and meet with their youth councils let them conduct a meeting or something. But I think getting the tour of the Capitol is good for them, but the program you guys have done is fantastic because they've enjoyed it. But I don't want to limit it because, like I said, we expanded ours to over 100. I didn't think the council would fund it, but they did. And the kids, they show up, they work, they do stuff. A lot of them, they'll put the hours in just to come to the Capitol thing. They like it. You guys have done well.
Yeah. I have a logistical question. The Capitol is significantly under construction this year. Parking is going to be after. The plaza is completely ripped up.
And I think as well, part of why, and Katie, hop in and correct me, part of why we've had that wider time range is also so that we can have those students again spread out throughout the entire Capitol. I think we would, as staff, really need to look at, right, part of, if we were to shorten that, we would be shortening the time for breakfast, which we would be having those 500 to 600 students in that 300 seat space. And then also having them all doing 500 students doing a tour in a fairly short time frame. So I think we as staff might request that we certainly look at that and understand that maybe the priorities of the board, but that we also have the flexibility to kind of plan the event logistically as we need to with those constraints. We're understanding that the priorities for as many students who want to come are able to attend.
I would suggest maybe even figuring out some cities A through M do tours in the morning and, N through Z go in the afternoon, just because the parking is going to be such a challenge. And then just the space will be more constrained because of the loss of the plaza. So people aren't going to be able to work and move in quite the same ways this year. I don't want to limit it, but I think we need to be realistic that as a former staffer during Capitol construction, it's
You could also do like breakfast at the Salt Palace and then have people park there and then bus them over and then bus them. But like we can be creative, I think.
We have a hand online, Mayor. We have Mayor Dirk Burton.
Good morning. As I listening, some of you brought up some of the comments I wanted to say. So I want to reiterate, we don't want to limit the count. So thank you for everyone jumping on there. The board, I think we'd be thrilled to help and participate in doing that as well. The second thing is, or third thing, I like the idea of cycling them in there so they don't all show up at the same time. So if we start at the Salt Palace, then cycle them over there. I think having the experience at the Capitol is valuable for the youth. But if we do them there in stages instead of all at one time and set up programs so they can and tour them around the building so they can see different things and then bring it back over to the Salt Palace afterwards. I like that idea. Then the last item is we call this Local Officials Day. When I first got on Utah League of Cities and Towns, I thought, oh, I'm a local official, so I went to it. Then I found out, oh, this is for youth council, so maybe we got to change the name of it to represent youth council instead of just local officials. Those are my comments. Thank you.
That's pretty good.
If I can have a quick comment, thank you. You know, a good point that you brought up is that we want to make sure people can still meet with their legislators if they want to, but it's been my experience that cities that want to meet with their legislators arrange that on their own anyway, and they do it whatever time the legislature, you know, has a break or whenever their legislator can pull out or something. They tend to organize that anyway around no matter what else is scheduled, no matter what, you know, they work that out on their own. And so I don't know that this would mess it up. I think they'd still keep doing it probably.
And we encourage them to do that so that it takes something off your plate.
And yeah, and the legislative boards are in committee meetings that morning and then on the floor. They do have things going on.
Right, but the cities, you know, you always see whoever, they just, you know.
The
they
picture
always
shows
pull
up.
The pictures show up, they pull them out and they say hi to the kids, they work that out, and everybody works that out on their own, however they work between them and their legislators, so I don't think changing this.
Yeah, we haven't been coordinating that anyway.
Yeah.
We also have Mayor Randall online with a hand.
Welcome, Mayor Randall.
Thank you. We're extremely fortunate because the night before, our Senator Ipsen takes all of the youth city council from Washington County. He arranges a dinner. Last year it was the old spaghetti factory, and spends time with the youth city council there. He invites our other legislators over for dinner and then arranges a private tour of the Capitol the night before. So that's really worked out well for us with our youth city council. And, you know, not all of you have a Senator Ipsen, but if something like that can be arranged with, you know, just a meeting time and a private tour, it really works. Our youth city council like that as much as anything. So
That's a great.
Yeah, George is who I was picturing. The pictures always show up. They arrange to meet with their people. So when Mayor Randall, when you raised your hand, I'm like, that's exactly the example that was in my head. You know, they work it out and still meet with their people at whatever time.
Which is what the expectation is. The league shouldn't have to do all of those
Right.
ins and outs and workings. That could be on them.
We just might have to let them know that that's an idea, because some of the youth councils are newer and maybe their advisor is new and is just kind of learning too. So maybe some kind of steps that would be best practices kind of things for youth councils in coming to the Capitol. You know, here's an idea. You might come the night before, contact your legislators before. And just a little step-by-step thing for those who are newer.
One of the things we've talked about implementing is different registration types, which is going to help us with that. Right now, it's youth for adult delegate and youth council advisor. So I always sit in the middle and go, oh, but I'm youth, but I'm an adult. And so we're making a youth council advisor straight up category so that we can have those registrants and say, here, you know, you're in charge of youth, here are the materials you need, here's what you can do beforehand, and kind of have a direct line to them.
This has been such great discussion. It's exactly what we were looking for. We don't have to take a vote on this. We just wanted to hear from everybody. I think we've got it loud and clear the direction we want to go. So thank you, Molly. And we will move on now to item number 5, our advocacy update from Cameron Gill.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And this will be a team effort with Justin, Carson, Jared, and the rest. As you can hear, I'm starting to lose my voice.
Yeah.
I blame the terrible
Saturday?
I did. I blame that terrible targeting call against Cole Bishop.
The first call.
It was. So-
Again, I came in and just leaned over and said, "Tom, did the Utes win? I didn't even watch it." And he starts to talk. I'm like, oh, something must have happened over the stadium.
So I always lose my voice for a few days in the fall when the weather starts to change. And so it started happening yesterday, still going today. So if folks cannot hear me online, you know, speak up, because again, we'll be doing a team effort. Let me tell you what we want to accomplish over the next hour in this advocacy section. First, there are multiple requests going before the UEOC on Wednesday that Mayor Ramsey will be casting votes on. So we want to make sure that the board has given her direction on how to vote on those items. Second, we have updates for you on the meetings that the league officers and league staff have had with state leaders since our last board meeting. It's been a very time-consuming last few weeks for the league officers, and so for the rest of the board, I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the amount of time the officers have spent the last 3 weeks attending meetings on your behalf with the governor's staff, with the Senate president, with the House Speaker, or soon-to-be Speaker, I should say. Ah, there's the slip, right? Oops. In addition to coordinating with league staff for those meetings. But with the UEOC meeting on Wednesday, it was important to get those meetings done in advance. Then, as part of the feedback from those meetings, we've gotten some key follow-up questions that state leaders have posed to us as recently as Friday afternoon that we put in the packet, and we're going to use a combination of Slido and open discussion to get your feedback, because this board won't meet again until early December, unless the officers choose otherwise in November. And the dynamics shift on housing and land use literally by the day. Last week, for example, we had interim meetings Tuesday, Wednesday. There were multiple presentations on housing both of those days. We had negotiations Wednesday afternoon. We met the legislative auditor's office on Thursday and the Commission on Housing Affordability on Friday. And the reason you didn't get your packet until Friday night is because the packet changed every day depending on how those meetings were going. So with that being said, officers, just a quick question for you. Is there anything any of you want to add to the memo that we wrote that recapped the meetings with state leaders? Is there anything we missed?
Just globally, I mean, I think you've got this in there, but globally, the thing that encouraged me is that we heard from the future speaker, even the Senate president, though he wasn't quite as sanguine about this, from the governor's office and from Representative White, at least, and Senator Fillmore, not so much. But they are getting the message that we have been putting out there, that we have done a lot. And this may be a year to mostly take stock of what we've done and see how the data lands, with the exception of some low-hanging fruit about the modular housing approval and other things that we are pretty much on consensus on. And the things that we hate, I think are still going to be presented, but even the leaders are saying, like, this is stuff that we know that there's not consensus about. And so we're just kind of like keeping it there, but it's not going to be elevated, I don't think.
Perfect.
Thank
you, Mayor.
I think that your speech before the interim committee last week was really great, because I feel like we're moving past them versus us.
Yeah.
And we're kind of spreading that out a little bit, and some awareness is happening that I think brings about a better solution. And we're not there. We see that in some of the comments, but at least it doesn't feel so just head on against each other. That they're willing to listen, especially the incoming speaker. He seems to be willing to be a little bit more open. So thank you.
He was highly complimentary.
Yeah.
We even heard Woodland Hills get mentioned favorably for approving town halls.
Mayor Ramsey.
Representative Schultz said, we've come a long way over the last number of years, and he sees the league as a partner in a team and recognizes that that it's not us against them, that we're working together to get the right thing done. He was pretty complimentary about that and grateful for it. This was good.
I hope this is okay to say in this setting, but I felt like at the same time, adding on to what Mayor Ramsey just said, he's come a long way in his appreciation for us.
Mm-hmm.
And his view of us has changed in the time that
Agreed.
he's been there, and that's really good to hear, and felt really good in that setting.
Perfect. Thank you, Seth. Mayor Kafusi, Mayor Walker, Councilman Pressure, anything any of you want to add?
That was a great discussion, and he gave us more time than was allotted, which is always helpful. Now we'll see if we get in again. Sometimes when we take too much time, but I'm sure we'll get in again. What do you think, Mayor? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think I agree with you that there's been enough done, although the lobby for more crazy stuff is certainly not letting up. I mean, they're still full bore, but, I thought the documents we gave them, specifically the number of units, that data was really, if they look at it, it'll shock them. Hopefully they looked at it, seemed like it had an impact on them. He's gonna be nice to Mayor Kafusi, and it'll be worth.
Gonna dump on you next year.
Yeah, that's what he said. I mean, you know, I don't know. She's figured out how to charm him.
Oh,
It was really quite, it's like watching a snake charmer. He just kind of went back in the basket.
It was either she figured it out or you hadn't figured it
He came up and then he went right back down in the basket.
So one more thing I'll say is it's a credit to the officers, but, over the years, I think that we've been able to build kind of personal relationships with these guys. They know us, they like us, and that's something I think is maybe different from in the past. So we're not like a unknown, element to them.
Hey, you had a comment?
Actually, I was just gonna say that I thought everyone's covered the meetings with. Need to build a Lily on how well they like.
So thank you for adding those additional perspectives to the rest of the board. There were multiple follow-up questions that came out of those meetings. And we've referenced some of them in the, in the recap, because while there is more than ever before an acknowledgement of the good things that are already underway, and there was an acknowledgement that there's not really a silver bullet for what comes next. There are a few follow-up questions that we've been asked. Really, we want to lead into today's discussion. So for example, during the CHA meeting on Friday, we presented the number from our research that show there are over 165,000 entitled units in 60 plus cities around the state. We still don't have 100% participation in that survey. Seth, thank you for all your help getting it out to city managers. But we had a critical mass, which then allowed us to present that number. Senator Fillmore and Representative White both asked publicly and afterward, how many of those units could be built tomorrow, but for infrastructure challenges but for interest rates, versus how many of these units are entitled, but the city process is slowing down their ability to get to market. That's a very difficult question to answer. So at LPC today, we're going to reference the fact that we are trying to do some more data follow-up to be able to go back, and we use actually some of Spanish Fork's data to go back and say, this many units, if this infrastructure challenge was overcome, they could be built today. And the term we've been using as staff has been, they could be unlocked. Still doesn't mean that the door gets opened and the shell goes in the ground, but they could be unlocked if the infrastructure was available. Really, it comes back to, I had one state leader say to me last week, what can the city still control in your process to facilitate or unlock starter homes? In other words, are cities doing everything you can do to help with starter homes specifically? Now, inevitably, you're going to ask the question of what is a starter home, and that's why in the agenda, Nick, well, actually just leave it on that slide. The first-time home buyer down payment assistance program is really unofficially defined starter homes in Utah as at up to $450,000 for a detached single family. So that's the number we heard from the governor's staff. That's the number we've heard from the governor himself. We've heard it from President Adams, as we need more housing units at that price point or below. So the question that was coming back to us is, are there other things cities can do to facilitate or unlock more of those starter homes? Meanwhile, while we were in one of these meetings at the Capitol, I got a text from a different state leader that I am going to read to you because it's a text of an email that one of our city people sent to someone. I'm not going to name the city, but it was a state leader basically saying, like, this is why the legislature feels like we need to act. So at the same time, we were in a very productive meeting, telling the good story of cities. This was the text I received from another state leader saying this is why the legislature needs to get more involved, okay? So I'm reading it word for word, but I will take out the city name. As a member of the blank city planning commission, I can advise that our city is not interested, nor will entertain a request for multi-unit development. The citizens of our city have made it very clear that they do not want multi-unit housing in our area. The housing vision for our city does not include multi-unit developments. I advise you to focus your efforts elsewhere.
Wow.
Sounds like a threat.
Planning commission?
That's
very
Yeah.
And the north.
I'm not gonna say where it was from. I'm not gonna say where it was.
It's only a planning.
State of Utah.
Right.
Yeah, what's a brand?
We don't wanna know. We're tired of
No, but
defending
that-
that. We can't defend that.
Well, so unfortunately, I get messages like this, either in person or electronically, multiple times a week. And one thing President Adams said in our meeting, and then Senator Fillmore said it to me on Friday, said if cities were being more proactive in doing as much as you can, there would be no need for legislators to feel like they have to step in. Now, with that being said, an email from one planning commissioner should not drive state policy, nor does it necessarily reflect the policy of that community. So that's why I'm not, saying that community, right? But I use it to just illustrate the back and forth that happens on an hourly basis at the Capitol. So we have, we asked, we put in the board packet a few questions we were prepared to think about that we're going to ask now via Slido. Nick, you go to the next slide.
Carson's
Carson, you go to the next slide. Oh, actually, go back one more time. Go back one more time. So what's up here on this screen are basically the questions, a little reworded, but questions from the board packet. You can see it in parentheses where it says board, those were in your board packet, ditto with question number 3. On question number 2, this is how things are going to change in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
And so before we start the Slido, Justin, can you just give the overview of what we're allowed to say and your thoughts on how Guiding Our Growth and Vision Utah and the housing audit will come together?
Yeah, so let's talk about the audit first. The housing audit will come out publicly during the next interim week so week of November 13th, the housing audit will come out. Right now they're in the phase where it's written, but it's not public yet. They're soliciting feedback from a very small group of people. Carson and Cam and I are on that list, a small group of people who get to see it. But we have not gone through it yet. So that'll be happening in the next couple of days. I think it's fair to say that the findings from the audit are not necessarily bad, but they will be uncomfortable. Because they're looking at individual cities. And some of what they're really looking at are, I'm trying to be careful about what I say because we had a meeting and we can't say much yet. They're trying to figure out some of what the targets are for housing. Because one of the problems that we have is no one knows how to define success right now as to when have you done enough? What have you done that's made a difference? Because there's not really a metric out there that says if city X has done this, they have done what they're supposed to, other than some of the MIHP reporting. So they're going to be looking at some of the holistic overviews of what do they think, not necessarily what they think targets should be, but looking at the idea that we need to maybe figure out what some targets could be, and then looking at, given some of the assumption, where the housing things are going to go. So they're looking at individual cities. They're going to name individual cities in both positive and somewhat negative light sometimes. So again, I don't think there's going to be anything, if you've been operating in the space for a while, it's going to shock anybody. But again, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable when that comes out. And then the way that looks with Guiding Our Growth and Vision Utah, they haven't really, as far as we can tell, they haven't really cross-pollinated their data or any of what they're looking at yet. But certainly with all of them coming at the same time, there's going to be an appetite to do something. I don't think we know what that something is yet. I don't think it really changes the conversation that we're having with stakeholders.
But certainly when the headlines are coming out that this thing happened, this thing happened, this thing happened, there's some inherent pressure there for legislators to feel like they're doing something. So everything we said a minute ago about, maybe the next speaker isn't necessarily in the mood to do anything big. When audits and other things hit, that tenor may change. So how did that first fairly vague report that we'll get a little more substantive soon?
Like we just went in a big circle.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And that's where we went last week, was in a big circle. But we will have the report in the next month. The report will be public, and obviously at that point we'll be able to delve more deeply into the specific findings and recommendations. But yeah, that's kind of the takeaway, and that's about what we can say as far as the audit goes.
And we'll have the ability to respond both in writing and via testimony to the audit committee, which includes House and Senate leadership during the November interim. So yes, it feels like going in circle, and it is a bit of a roller coaster, because we'll walk out of one meeting, and the Friday was a perfect example. To the credit of Representative White and Senator Fillmore and Representative Briscoe, those are the co-chairs of the Commission on Housing Affordability. During the meeting last week, they all acknowledged that cities were doing a lot of the space, and there was an effort made to move items that were not consensus items. And Marcelo Mastrini's been in these negotiations all interim. We've gotten to consensus on certain items that we'll be bringing to you for a vote here in a few minutes. And then there were a list of non-consensus items. There was an effort to try to move the non-consensus items forward as consensus. And to the credit of those legislators, they said, no, they want consensus yet. And so we need to be true to the process. Representative White was actually the first one to speak up and say, these are not consensus, so we shouldn't move them into the consensus pile. But we do think that audit is going to rekindle the flame that flickers depending on the day. Again, we'll have that next little while, and then the board will not meet before that audit goes public. So we'll be circling with the officers, and we will have an LPC before it's presented to talk through our strategy of how to respond to it.
The other thing I want to add on that, it's the audit is not going to just be uncomfortable for us. The developers have brought plenty of things to them, and they've poked holes in some of those assertions as well. So I think it's going to be uncomfortable for everybody, saying, here's what the problem is, we need to look at what's going to be done. But yeah, I'm not going to say that thing I was about to say how myself, but it's going to come out being uncomfortable. People are all going to have to pause and take a look.
So as part of this audit, we've always wondered, because there has been no definition of what affordable housing is. So are they using that 450,000
I can't even speak to
benchmark
that.
and lower?
We can't say anything about any benchmarks.
Because that seems to be what we've talked about is, well, with this, that loan, or I mean, that 20,000 down payment or whatever has been that's been that benchmark of, oh, you're a first time home buyer, this is affordable.
Yeah.
So they're not using the same numbers going forward.
Well, we cannot speak to the audit legally. Legally, we're just not allowed to at this point. In a few weeks, we'll be able to. But I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the key message in all of our meetings, was the state leader saying, we need more starter homes. What do cities have in their power to try to facilitate starter homes? And there was great pushback from the officers saying to state leaders, here are ways we've zoned for it, and it hasn't been built. And that's outside of our control, and they acknowledge that that's outside of our control. So it's this back and forth piece. So let's switch it over to the Slido questions here. Carson, can you slide on over?
Slide on over to Slido.
Slide on over to Slido.
This will ask you to enter your name. Please just enter your city on that field instead. That's just a better way to track things across respondents, so you don't get tons of duplications.
Mayor Burton's raised his hand. Nick, can you call on him while people are getting the slide ready?
I'll assume that means I'm called up. I wanted to comment on what you told us about, Cameron, about that commissioner. As the city, one or two, sometimes commissioner or council member or something, might make comments similar to that. Somehow we need to make it important that the legislators understand that sometimes there are people that say things, but that's not the city's stand on those positions. And it's the same thing on them. Sometimes we hear from different legislators or different representatives that say things, but that's not the legislators as a whole, and we need to work with them as a whole. So we need to make sure that when those come up there, that those are just fractions, but it's not the official stand of the city or the official stand of the league. And
Yep.
those will continue to pop up.
Yep, amen, amen, Mayor. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
As we're bringing this up, was any discussion on the word detached? Because if a starter home has to be detached, that really
Yeah.
limits a lot of, back to the choice.
Yep.
Townhomes, condos.
Yeah, no, so go ahead, Mayor.
I was just gonna say, on my trip to the Transjordan landfill this weekend, in close proximity to said landfill, I saw a townhome development where the sign said townhomes starting at 450. Not 450 and below, starting at 450 within a mile of the landfill. So I mean, if we're gonna talk affordability, we've got to come up with,
I happen to know where that sign is.
you know where it is, yeah. But I mean, I don't even know how that's affordable, but
Because that's my question on the very first question.
that's the townhomes that you're saying. I mean, that's.
So right now, when we, for the purposes of the next 45 minutes of discussion, when we're saying starter home, it would be anything that qualifies for President Adams's program, which includes condos, townhomes, or detached single-family housing up to 450, because they're all lumped in together. There has been discussion about dividing that program and having a cap for detached single-family and a cap for condos and other types of housing units. But right now, the only definition that we can really work with is the definition for President Adams' program, which does treat all of them the same. Does that help?
Yeah, because, I mean, we have stuff right on our plate right now to, up for a vote about affordable housing and incentives.
Yep.
Across the board, multifamily, multi-use areas, single-family zones, all that stuff, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so,
But here's my problem with this whole question. I've got a neighborhood ready to get built. Some of the lots are 11,000 square feet, some are 8. There's not a single one of those homes that's gonna be affordable. They're gonna start at 750.
Agreed.
So I don't know how I answer this question, because I've zoned for smaller lots and they put massive houses on
That's
small
how you
lots.
answer the question. Right? Like, we're trying to get to what the city can control, not what the market has created, of what your city can control. That's why it says to plan for, not, to achieve, because that's the key distinction here. And we're asking this question, so the follow-up question is gonna be, are you asking if you think that your fellow cities in your region are doing it too? So, yeah, go ahead and answer this question. So Carson, are we showing results or not?
Can you give us more context? Like, what if you're a built-out city? We did build starter homes.
Yeah, see, that's the thing I asked.
30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, we're, infill PUDs on smaller lots, but, it's really limited. There's 600 now.
I don't have infill lots left.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
so we're also built out, but we have incentives to increase, incentives to increase our density in multifamily zones, even in single-family zones, with different incentives, buy or rent. So we're built out, but we're still trying to increase it.
There's a big townhome builder building a big project in Sandy right now. They're all townhomes, they're beautiful, every single one of them's for rent. And they have no intention of building another townhome, this builder told me this, ever again that won't be for rent.
Yeah.
Right.
Then for, then.
Okay. And
What the hell are we doing?
But, right, but this illustrates the difficulty. You just heard Justin talk about the fact that we anticipate the next step at the state capitol is going to be around quote unquote benchmarks, right? And you're illustrating how difficult it is to try to create those. But so Carson, do you have the results from the first question?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up right.
Okay.
We also have a handout from Mayor Johnson and Lehigh, and Mayor Burton says, what can we do to bring back sweat equity?
Yeah, so that's the sweat equity piece, Mayor Burton, has come up in these conversations. So that's actually come up quite a bit. So let's go Mayor Johnson, but then recognize like we have a few slider questions that all build on each other. Okay, so let's do Mayor Johnson and then we're gonna jump to the next couple of questions.
Well, I'll make it quick. One question I have, and I think there seems to be some questions as to what affordable housing mean. Are we just talking whether or not you can afford an apartment or whether you can afford to buy a home and build equity? That's one
Yep.
question.
So let me answer that one first, Mayor. When
Okay,
we're talking about starter homes, we are talking about homes that qualify under President Adams's definition, which is first-time home buyer starter home product. So it's not more apartments. We're talking about true housing product for first-time home buyers, recognizing too that the market is not necessarily producing those units for sale, as Mayor Walker has indicated. So that's why we're trying to get a sense from you on because the argument at the Capitol as recently as Friday afternoon was, if cities were doing more to plan for this, the legislature wouldn't have to get involved. So we're trying to get the sense of, do we feel like we are doing enough? And if so, then like, where do these pieces come together? So,
Okay.
good. Did you have a second question, Mayor?
yeah, well, it's not a question, it's a statement. I'm going to tell you what we had to do because of course in Lehigh, we have some pretty small units that are for sale and they're still not affordable. So my council about a month ago, we decided to put a percentage on all our future TODs that they have to have at least 30% of those units have to be for sale, not just for rent. Because we don't know how else to address it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that was part of the discussion with a couple of state leaders last week is how do you, cities have very limited tools. We have tools, but they're limited. So what tools can we use to get to the outcome of the owner occupied starter home? And so you just outlined one way to do it. And we're actually going to come back to that concept here in just a moment. So now this question for you to think through your region. Okay, you are all on the league board representing different areas, whether that's rural Utah, suburban communities, big cities, small towns.
You just mean we've zoned.
Yep.
They've chosen to build apartments.
We've zoned.
That's
and
not
nothing's for us. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, what's actually.
Not the
in your
market.
power.
Yep.
Okay.
What is in your wheelhouse?
But you remember Schultz said, when we talked about condos remember at a meeting, he was, the condo problem is our liability issues fixed in Utah, but the national insurance view of it is they don't, we're not a big enough market to change condo financing. But he talked about townhomes. I mean, he brought those up specifically, do you remember? And like that was the future of it. But I'm gonna tell you, there's other cities in our region that have minimum size restrictions on their lots that are 3,000 foot restrictions. I'm not naming any cities, but I think we should have a maximum size restriction. 1,500 square foot house or townhome, and that's what you got. You can't build bigger than that. Smaller lot, but developers lose their mind.
So let's put it, this is what Mayor Walker just said, combined with what Mayor Johnson said. But this is helpful. So by and large, you feel like the regions you represent are also in the quote unquote fair share space. So that's helpful insight for us. Okay. So Carson, let's skip right to slide 9, the survey data, LPC survey, yeah, right here. So last year, we asked, or the last 2 summers, we've asked LPC to fill out a survey where you've ranked items that are concerning up to items that are comfortable. And then we reported back to the league board each spring and how much we've accomplished in those spaces. So you've told us, this is no surprise, that in the concerning, making general plans binding, preempting zoning, et cetera, that those are very concerning. Those are unacceptable outcomes for our folks.
Mayor Ramsey, it says up to 450, but you know where that place is, it starts at 450.
That's right. So in the mixed results, so these are the feedback from dozens of LPC members, putting many in here, of like, what are the outcomes that could work for us? State incentives for residential density. The local governments must rezone if consistent with MIHP unless compelling reason to do otherwise, or require expedited local land use processes. That's word for word what we had in the survey that you responded back to us, and these ones were in the mixed space. We're going to focus the conversation for the next few minutes on that last one. what could this look like for projects that are X% starter homes, okay? This gets to what Mayor Johnson was just saying, that there are places where the market left to its own devices are not producing these units, even if we're planning for them. So Carson, go to the next slide. So these are the types of levers that the state or local governments can pull. Councilmember Dugan, some of these will look familiar because they're in the overlay that you're considering in Salt Lake. What's in italics are things that have been in bills in the last couple of years. We tried to separate it between the things that are legislative in nature versus things that are administrative in nature. So we do have some tools. There are other things that we've been preempted in. For example, coming back to Mayor Johnson's example, cities cannot require in your base zoning that X% of a development has to be set aside as affordable. You cannot do that. You can do it in a development agreement. You cannot do it in base zoning. What you can do is you can incentivize it. You can incentivize it by saying, if you do set aside this many affordable units, we'll give you a density bonus. That's pretty standard operating procedure. Or the point that Mayor Walker and Mayor Johnson were making is, how do we incentivize that these units will actually be set aside for sale product and not just for rent product? Okay, so those are some of the levers. Next slide.
That is difficult to do from a property rights standpoint.
It is.
The most, I mean, the thing that we've been able to figure out to do is we have required, in connection with the zone change and a development agreement, to require separate platting of certain units so that they're capable of being conveyed, because they're separate parcel numbers, but you can't make them sell them.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. And Mayor Silvestrini also made that point in a couple of the meetings we had with state leaders. So this is why I used a term in the memo that there's an acknowledgement account, there's no silver bullet, right? You've got some stakeholders who say the silver bullet is to do what California or Oregon or other states have done, where they've just preempted city zoning. But you could get rid of zoning tomorrow. And eliminating zoning doesn't mean that starter homes are magically going to get built because of the market forces at play, right? And that's actually been the experience in.
Zoning might be the only way starter homes get built.
Okay, so now you're onto something here, Mayor Walker. Now you're onto something here. So, well, we as staff are trying to do is we're looking at those LPC results and getting all those questions we were getting last week. Our city's doing everything in their power to facilitate or unlock starter homes.
Make a t-shirt, Molly. Zoning is how you get affordable.
Zoning, the only answer to affordable housing.
I'm gonna take them out with the t-shirt cannon.
Cosmos. Yes.
Well, I really want to go down the Cosmo versus Swoop path.
Save your voice.
That's like throwing,
So as we were trying to understand from those LPC results, LPC survey results, like what does it mean to expedite the land use process for starter homes? This is what we brainstormed. Some of these concepts have come up with stakeholders, but what we wanted to get a sense from the board is if these concepts are worth exploring further. So let's start on the left side, the potential action. So the administrative priority. Right now, there are some shot clocks that already exist in state law, but they treat all residential development the same. So would it make sense to come back and say, let's look at certain local review processes and prioritize a project that's going to result in something that meets the starter home criteria. So it's not just any and all housing, this will be sold at 450 or below. That comes at the end of that comes when it goes to market, right? Because like you qualify for this expedited review if you, in a development agreement, agree that these units are going to be for sale starter.
All of them or some?
Well, right now what we've got is like X%, right? Like,
Yeah.
So
Kind of TBD on that.
Mayor Johnson, you've kind of got this handled in your city with respect to your timeframes. Enlighten us on what you guys have done, because I think you're you've gone a right direction.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question, Mayor Walker, but if I
Well,
do.
your review times, you told me you had you had your staff at a specific number of days to get something done, and that was the law.
Oh, sure. So what we do, and I know this is going to be different than a lot of other cities, but actually works really, really well, is we've shortened the approval process significantly because when we have somebody turn in plans, the next week they're in front of DRC meeting. So that puts pressure on our staff to make sure they review everything and get it prepared, and they can have a face-to-face discussion with the developers. So there's not a lot of back and forth through emails. But probably the key time saver in moving projects forward is the fact that when they have a list of items from either the planning commission or the city council for concept or preliminary, if they have all but 10 of those items resolved, they're moved forward to the next step, because ideally they can't get final approval until they're all done anyway. So it doesn't make any sense to hold a developer up till he gets every single item done on his punch list before he moves forward. It just doesn't make sense to hold them up because they can't get final until everything's done anyway.
Is that what you make, Cameron, some of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's on the administrative side, that's really what we're talking about, but it would be tied to the outcome of for sale starter homes. So
At 450 or below.
at 450 or below, right? Because that's the state definition right now. So it would be a way for us to go back to state leaders and say, look, if a developer walks into Draper City Hall and says, I can deliver this, it essentially gets prioritized in that process compared to other types of projects.
Apartments. Yeah.
Well, just other type, right, other types of projects. Now, let's jump over to the circumstance side for a second, because somebody asked the question, like, are they all starter homes or what? So you see right now, we've just put certain percentage of the starter homes that you would sell up to that amount. So that would be a detail we need to think through. On outcome number two, well, outcome number one would apply to all cities, from small towns to big cities. Outcome number two would say, no, let's just tie this into MIHP cities. So those are cities above 5,000 in population. This expedited process would apply. I want to speak up for the high growth cities right now, because I could see some of them, and Mayor Johnson, you represent quite a few of them on the league board, say, hey, we already have a lot of starter homes. So this would basically expedite the process for everything that's getting built in our city anyway. So I think that's a fair consideration to think through. And then outcome number three would be that this process applies only for the MIHP cities non-compliant. So it's more of a stick as opposed to something we would offer with outcomes 1 and 2. So we're going to ask you a Slido question in a second. Actually, let's just do the Slido question right now. So Carson, can we skip over to the Slido question? So we're going to ask you 2 questions. This is just your first blush. Now, what do you think about what we just described? Is that something worth exploring further? And then we'll ask you an open-ended question about what you see as the benefits and challenges to what we've just described. Some of which have already come up in the meeting, but we want to give you a chance to actually fill in your specific thoughts, because we don't have time for everybody to speak up on that piece.
This goes back to my whole, we're basically doing this as we speak.
That's right.
Yeah. For us.
But not forgetting some of these smaller cities, because we know some of the motivation coming from the top is because of the behavior of some of the smaller areas.
Right, some small areas that don't have much capacity, and
but have the have the 1 acre lots.
Right.
To be
Well, because historically, those have been what those communities have been, right?
I think everyone should get included.
Yeah.
The experience in our cities has not been the time frame on bringing in these affordable homes. It's just lack of people coming to apply to build these affordable homes. So I don't think this is really the difference.
But Mayor Vern, I'm glad you said that, because what we were saying to state leaders last week was, again, and you could get rid of our process altogether. And still it wouldn't necessarily result in more starter homes.
This is
Right.
us telling them, put your money where your mouth is, right?
Mhm.
We'll make it easy for you. You
Yeah.
deliver the product.
Right, yep, exactly said.
Hey, Cameron, if I could say something real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, and then Carson, can you go back to the PowerPoint slide so we can talk to the legislative piece? Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
So I was just gonna say, for those who are even just somewhat, in support of streamlining the process, there is a way to do it to actually relieve some of the work from your staff if it's done right. So that's something to keep in mind on some of these projects. You can reduce that work that you put them through.
It is. Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's just, we're talking about affordable starter homes at $450. Salt Lake County area median income is $100,000,
Yeah,
right? That is 150% of the area median income, basically 30%, right? And we're looking at our incentive plan is that for homeowners, 80% AMI or less. So the 80% to 150% is a segment of the population that we're not looking at. We'll help you at 80% AMI or below, or if you make over 150% AMI, you'll probably be able to you may find something. So there's that gap, and that's not what we're calling affordable. Affordable is at 80% AMI or less.
that's right.
So it's a conflict in that use of the term affordable and starter homes, because it's still outside of the reach of a good chunk of the population who's looking for a home.
No, you're exactly correct. And the reason for this conversation, we focused on the starter home piece was because we at least can look to one definition and try to steer the conversation there. But you're right, this is one piece of the bigger puzzle. Okay. Now the trickier one.
Remember, you can have a hotbed Sunday as far as I'm concerned.
First class.
Okay, so now the trickier one. What we just discussed was the administrative prioritization. Okay, and Mayor Johnson gave a terrific example of what that could look like. Well, what happens if you are a city whose zoning does not allow for the types of units that could be built that could qualify for this program? Because similar to that email that I read earlier. We know that our members, including all of you, do not want the state to step in and preempt our zoning authority. We just had a resolution that the entire league membership endorsed, saying that very thing. So this is.
But Dan's point is well taken, because if the number's dumb.
Yeah. But the number's the law right now.
I know, it's dumb, it's a dumb number.
Yeah.
If we're talking about doing what you're, in Salt Lake City where you're infilling, I mean, when you're a quarter mile from a landfill and it's starting at 450,
Yeah.
that's a dumb number.
Well, and then ultimately, I think the number is going to shift over the next year or two. So right now, we're using that number because that's what the law is. But the focus of that number, the focus is the first-time home buyer. That's the policy. The number's going to shift, I think. On the legislative piece, so when I say legislative consideration, we're talking about your city councils, okay? What if state law required the city council to consider a rezone request that would result in the qualifying project that unlocks starter homes? Because right now, as evident by that email example, you could have a scenario where city council says, hey, our zoning is what it is, and the administrative prioritization we just discussed would never really come into play. But there are certainly pros and cons to this. But if the state were to step in and say, hey, city, you have to consider the rezone request if it results in this outcome. In ownership, same thing, first time home buyer type product, the council has to consider it. Doesn't have to say yes.
Ownership.
Yes, yep. It doesn't have to say yes, because there may be valid reasons why that rezone doesn't make sense in that area, but you at least have to consider the rezone request formally.
Do we,
So let's
are
go
there
to
places
slide
where we don't?
Well,
I mean, I view that to almost be a thing of right, that you get a right to get an answer.
so the question from Mayor Silvestrini is, are there examples where that happens? And yeah, I would say, yeah, there are examples where the city won't even consider the rezone request, which is actually in the right of that city to say, no, we're not gonna look through that rezone request for these other reasons. And what this idea is trying to get us to think through, and again, it's uncomfortable, is to say that property owner, if they qualify, the property owner is entitled to, I shouldn't use the word entitled, empowered to have a formal hearing. City council still may say no, but you at least would be forced to consider the rezone ask if it meets this
If it
criteria,
meets the affordability criteria.
if it meets the starter home criteria.
That is a question because it seems like we also rule not only by what the city council approves, but by the homeowners association. And they put a lot of restrictions on or criteria on there that the city also doesn't have any enforcement over. And yet, oh, it has to be this size and made out of this materials and this and this, and those kinds of things can add to the overall cost of the home as well. And so I guess that's, I see this all the time in our area. People say, well, it has to be this brick, it has to be this color, it has to be this much of landscaping, it has to be this, because the homeowners association put that in, not us.
Yep, and the legislature on IADUs preempted homeowners associations in the same way they preempted us for that very reason. Okay, this is helpful info. Carson, can you go to the open-ended question? So this is for the. Oh, shoot, we didn't ask the open-ended question on administrative, right?
No, you did.
Oh, we just jumped to the next one. Okay. So this is the open-ended question around the administrative process piece. Do you see potential benefits and challenges around the expediting the administrative process for projects that result in starter homes that meet the.
Sorry, so this is the prior question.
Yeah, this is, sorry, I screwed up. This would be for the administrative prioritization. So do you see potential benefits and challenges you want us to be aware of as we're having these conversations? And then we'll ask a similar question on the legislative one. Yeah, so whoever wrote that one, yeah, that is an exact potential consequence. Yeah. Yeah, Mayor Wright, that's really helpful to know on the Tory side. So potential benefits and challenges here. Yeah, excellent points. But this is why we wanted the feedback.
What about a uniform starter home?
Flat areas never on until set.
Okay, looks like we had the last comment.
Can you send us all those comments?
Yeah, what?
Can you send us those comments so that we just have them as we're.
We'll organize them first. Yeah, we'll have a summary that we can send out. So Carson, can you go to the next? Is this the legislative one?
So this is the benefits and challenges for the second, the rezone.
Okay. Yeah, and I saw, so essentially, if there's anything else, if you see benefits or challenges to but the idea of requiring the city council to consider a rezone request, benefits and challenges to that type of approach, again, it would have to meet the starter home criteria. Well, maybe there's two
Yeah,
different.
that's what you do, but I don't.
It seems like it's nationwide, it's like 8% AMI is like the affordability line, but it's skewed because our cost of living is at 6.3 times what our income is.
Yeah.
That's what that works. If your cost of living is at right around 3.3 or under 4, which is acceptable.
Right. So for those online, the conversation that Mayor Walker and Councilmember Dugan were just talking about is like back to that, the definition of AMI and how that works with our current elevated cost of living right now in Utah. There is a key point here, whoever wrote the, what is the developer going to do to comply with legislation? Yeah, ultimately, you'd have a scenario where a council could say no, and that would add fuel to the fire of cities are not doing their part. But in a way that's happening now anyway, but this would at least be forcing the conversation around starter homes. So, okay, we'll leave this open for another minute, and then we're going to pivot to where you need to vote for the items on Wednesday's agenda for Mayor Ramsey's benefit. But this has been great discussion, because this is a lot of where we think the conversation is going to pivot after Wednesday is going to be more starter homes, more starter homes, more starter homes. What can the state do? What can cities do? What can developers do to get to some more starter home product? And I think when we get to the conversation about benchmarks, that's where we started that concept of fair share. Like that is going to be a very complicated discussion that I think the audit is going to force. So, Mayor Walker?
Well, if you go with this, you know, the city council has to adhere it. What about some type of incentive for the ones that approve it, or some type of disincentive for the ones that don't? I mean, certainly this puts the ball, you know, on the 20-yard line for the developers. They talk like they want to build affordable housing, but that's not really what they want to build. What they want to build is what they can make the most money out, which is apartments. So this does definitely push the ball in their court to step up. And if a council approves it and then they don't build it, it does give us a pretty good argument. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like anecdotally, you can get one city council planning commission member send an email to a legislator, and they all start talking about how we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So we gotta have some way that when the ones that don't want to play ball make their comments instead of driving the whole wagon around. We gotta be able to do something about that. I think we gotta address that somewhere.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna keep getting these anecdotal comments that are gonna rile them all up, because they're easy to rile.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Mayor Walker. And the database that the state is building will help inform the larger narrative, the more holistic approach. And that data is going to be available this fall. So you're gonna have the audit, you're gonna have guiding our growth, you're gonna have the data, you've got all those pieces coming together. And Justin used his words, I think, really well when he said, I think that's all, it's gonna be uncomfortable. I think there are gonna be things in there that will be good for cities. And there are gonna be things in there that'll be uncomfortable, but that's okay if we keep our eyes on the prize. And this has been a really good discussion about where the sandbox should be for us as an organization. We'll probably ask a couple of follow-up questions at LPC on this topic. We will ask follow-up questions at LPC on this topic. We could have broadened it further, but if the board had shut it down, we wanted to take it to LPC. But since, you know, the slide results demonstrate that there's some comfort in continuing this conversation, we'll plan to continue it at LPC. Okay, let's go. Let's go to the, Nick, can you go back to the board packet? And then we need to give Mayor Ramsey some direction in the next 15 or so minutes, because we'll walk through what's going to be before her to vote on Wednesday.
Ruben Paulson, Brandon.
Do the DWS presentation first. Okay. So this is from Friday. We told you this is partly why your packet came late. Can you go down, Nick? So let's start there. This is all in your grid as well, but it's a little easier to follow here. This is what the CHA approved on Friday. And it's our staff recommendation that we endorse this approach as well. Molly, I'll come to you in a moment on that last item got the homeless dedicated funding source. But ongoing funding, these are the requests.
This doesn't include the recommendation to include $5 million for Habitat for Humanity that they added, so this is sitting in the numbers a little bigger.
So these items, they're in your grid explaining what each of them do, but this is what the CHA endorsed. Some ongoing funding, includes the homeless shelter city mitigation fund that all cities pay into. That would be to increase it from 5 million ongoing state money to 7.5 million ongoing state money. With the one-time funding piece, there'd be additional grants. So the state budget is going to be as tight, or maybe not as tight as city budgets, but it's going to be much tighter this year than it's been in several years. So don't focus on the dollar amount. Really, it's the underlying policy, because I don't think any of these dollar amounts get funded at this amount, but it's the policy that will proceed. Molly, can you give a quick explanation, recognizing there's no source has been identified yet, but what that revenue would fund?
Sure. So right now, homeless services have been largely funded through kind of one-time or really one-time appropriation and trying to string together sufficient funding to the service providers. When that happens, they often come up short, and then when that happens, they look to the mitigation funds to fill the gaps. What Wayne is looking for is essentially an ongoing funding source statewide to support homeless services. So this would be the operations, the service providers, mostly. And so they're still working to identify what that would be, but OHS is looking to identify just shy of $40 million that could be ongoing funding for homeless services.
Yeah, it's we've taken a dollar, but
Turn it way into a real agency.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And one thing the governor said a couple of weeks ago when we met with him in Southern Utah was that he wanted to take the most holistic approach to addressing homelessness and related issues at any time in state history. And they're still working on the exact details of what that looks like, but you need money to execute something of that scale. So
Yeah, like when we met with him last week, the officers that were members, Neil Abercrombie said the governor's tasked half of his cabinet with rethinking how we're approaching homelessness. So this is going to be a big priority.
And that's on top of the one-time funding.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, that's.
It's
I like
definitely-
it when I'm out. Good.
Okay, Nick, will you go to the next slide? So I mentioned before consensus, non-consensus items at the CHA. These were the policy items that have consensus through our work group. The modular piece that we've discussed at the board meeting the last two times, Jared's getting close in his negotiations with the other stakeholders around what that would look like. State infrastructure funding to unlock those units. The example I gave in my testimony last week came from a city in Utah County where they have 1,800 units that are completely through the city process, simply waiting for shovels in the ground, but they need infrastructure because it's a greenfield area. Well, better put greenfield / brownfield area, and they need tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure. But the units there are of medium to high density and focused at homeowners. So it's the exact sort of project that we can all say we want, but it's held up right now because of the infrastructure costs. So if the state were to step in and facilitate the infrastructure funding tied to the housing production of the project, with the starter homes as the target, it's a way for all the stakeholders to get to yes. RDA CRA flexibility, that's a technical thing. State funds to facilitate local planning. So the example that we've used here is when a city applies for outdoor recreation grant funding, there's nothing in that funding request to the state that talks about what the local plans are and how their locals are planning for housing. So aligning those, that if Cameron City wants money for this trail system, Cameron City needs to demonstrate how they're planning holistically. So you're aligning those pieces. The governor's office really likes that approach. Align state economic development incentives, missing middle housing toolkit. So this, several of you have brought up the concern for small local governments that don't have the expertise to figure out how to zone for this type of product. So coming up with a toolkit, we're actually already underway with the Ombudsman's office on this one. Improving land use outcomes in the courts. We've had meetings with the administrative office of the courts here to brainstorm several different paths forward. And then per your results in the September board meeting, defining how garages count toward parking minimums. The vast majority of the board said they were comfortable with us proceeding there. So that's on the consensus list. Next slide, Nick. Next slide. These are the non-consensus items. State standards for parking minimums, state standards for residential setbacks, making general plans binding, having the state assign a minimum base density number. What this would mean in practice would be Cameron City would need to accommodate 5 units to the acre citywide, and then Cameron City would figure out where that goes in the city, or damages or financial penalties against cities, and then a state body that can be a land use appeal authority for local decisions. So you can see why we work so hard to keep these in the non-consensus list. Okay, Nick, can you slide down to the grid? Okay, so now you'll see them in the grid, and in a moment, we'll ask for a motion here. But within the grid, anything that is green are the items that staff is recommending that we support. The red are the items of non-consensus from the CHOP. Right? So you can see on the right, the items in green. Keep going, Nick. So the items in green will all be coming before the UEOC on Wednesday. The items in red will be acknowledged as non-consensus items. And it could happen that UEOC says, actually, we want to move these into consensus items. So that's where, again, having the board validate, no, consensus means consensus for Mayor Ramsey would be helpful. Then here's the dollar amount that we just walked through, where each of those dollars would go. Keep going down. This is how those dollars, this is Wayne's slide, but of how the dollars all fit together to facilitate supportive housing. And then I'll stop here because this is where it pivots away from the CHA, because Mayor Ramsey will also be voting on she'll also be voting on transit innovation grants. That's something we haven't talked about at the board level for a few months. We talked about it about 4 months ago. The concept here is, state one-time money that local governments can apply for to facilitate increased transit ridership. So this would be a community could say, we're going to partner to increase the service on this route, or we're going to have a park and ride in an area that doesn't have the service, or with a shuttle system to a light rail station, or a pass program to facilitate entrance or facilitate people riding transit to that location. So it would be one-time money in this innovation grant statewide to help increase transit ridership. So Mayor Ramsey, I'll pause there. We've hit everything that as of now is coming to the UEOC in the growth and transportation and the Commission on Housing Affordability space. Justin has been point person on a couple of the other UEOC committees. Justin, is there anything else worth bringing up?
No. Nothing to worry about now.
No. So Mayor Ramsey, are there any clarifying questions that you have about what's coming to you on Wednesday, or anything else you'd like from the board before Wednesday? We'll take a vote with the staff recommendations here in a second, but anything else you would like from the rest of the board?
No, I just want to hear what your thoughts are. I can tell you a lot of work from the league team, the league staff, and lots of outside collaborative partners has gone into this, but so much time has been spent reaching this point that I am hard pressed to think that these items won't all pass at the UEOC. I think they will, but they've also been being vetted and worked on and getting a little granular in these things for months to reach this point. I do think they'll probably pass. If there's anything that we still think is glaring, that is a disaster. We don't like that. I need to hear that. I need to know that, so I do look forward to your vote and hearing what you have to say, but I can't say enough good about everybody whether it's board members, whether it's staff, any of us who have been working on all of these things for so long. A lot of good work's been done to try to get these things to a place where we can at least wrap our heads around what's being presented and have had a lot of input on city's position. So I just look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Perfect. The last thing I'll add with UEOC 3 and UEOC 4, you'll notice there's nothing highlighted in those. The reason for that is 3 is focusing a lot on lids, PIDs, DIDs. We've talked about these at length. So our lead position via LPC has been, we have to be the gatekeeper. So if that comes up at UEOC, we already have that position in place. For item number 4, we have not yet gotten to consensus on the transportation utility fee. So that's why I don't think it's coming up on Wednesday.
So just a question on the innovation grants to the municipalities. Does that include a funding to UTA to buy more buses to help that? Because I can't remember how that, when we had those discussions, where that landed. Yeah, Salt Lake City can say, yeah, we'll add another, $200,000 to increase our frequency on buses, but there's not enough buses to increase that.
So if they don't have the buses or the drivers,
Right.
that's the purpose,
Yeah.
right? So part of the application process is the city with the transit provider have to demonstrate they can accomplish what the grant would fund.
Okay, so it's not incentivizing more funding to extra buses.
Well, it could, yeah, it could. So for example, in your, if you're saying we want to double frequency on Route 209,
Right.
and we think people will ride it, and UTA says if we had this amount of money, we could purchase shuttles to accommodate it and drivers. Okay, then the state could fund it, they could do it, but it's one-time money. So that's the key piece.
Okay, thanks.
So any questions about anything that's been highlighted? Again, highlighted in green is staff recommendation of support. Highlighted in red are the current non-consensus items, so that our recommendation is that they continue as non-consensus items. And that's what we'd be forwarding to Mayor Ramsey for purposes of her vote on Wednesday. So any questions for Mayor Ramsey or for lead staff?
Go back to that attorney fee provision.
Yeah,
Yeah, that cannot become,
yeah, go up.
that will break us all.
Keep going right there. Yep, that's why it's in red.
I mean.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
mean, you take a sidewalk trip and fall, we have a threshold all of us do where we settle them because it costs too much money to defend it. We cannot have more of that. I mean, that just, being a plaintiff's lawyer like I am, I would like it, but it'll break us.
Yep, agreed.
I move that we approve the direction for Mayor Ramsey to vote for the green items and fight like hell on the red items.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Who's our second?
Everyone.
Yes, we call it. All right, the motion carries. Thank you.
So can I ask a question though from this?
You're talking about points, you're not gonna say fight like hell, if that's what you're.
They should.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, maybe not, maybe they will.
My fair share of that this last week anyway. Last night I had a council member I was on the phone with and she said, "Who even are you? What have you turned into?" I'm like, I don't know. But no, question though, do we think that these things that we do not have, that we do not support, are they all gonna be lumped in together? Am I gonna have to say, you know what, because of these non-consensus, I mean, are they gonna try to work non-consensus items, consensus items in? That's happened before. And I've had to point it out and pull it out and say, you know what, I can support this, not this, so I have to vote no or
That's right.
whatever, you know?
That's right, that's why you and I are constantly.
Yeah. Yes.
You'll get we all get the materials minutes before the meeting, we're pouring over it to make sure that all boards are.
And right now, the agenda doesn't have any.
Well, we won't see the materials until last minute as usual, so, yeah, I think that the motion is clear. I think when we get in the meeting, we'll just need to be vigilant.
We'll just navigate.
The will of the CHA on Friday, to the credit of the CHA membership and leadership. The motion on Monday was consensus, non-consensus, they stay in their categories, and the dialogue still continues on the non-consensus. I think the audit will force more discussion on the non-consensus.
They'll still present probably non-consensus
Yeah.
items, but then say, "Oh, we're still working on that, so we're bringing to you today." Okay, with any luck, that's good. Either way, good. Thank you. This is what I need to know.
And you're William Wallace on the red.
I love it.
Okay, Justin, anything else UEOC related?
Ken, does that motion hit everything you had in the actions here?
That's right. Yes. And Justin, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay,
And we hit item number 6.
yep, we hit number 6.
Okay, great. Well then, is there any other business from staff that we need to discuss?
I need to do number 6.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Okay. So I inadvertently skipped in the engagement report, the Utah policy piece. So Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
And I will immediately turn it over to Cassidy.
I'll turn it over to Molly Cassidy to finish the Utah policy piece.
Great. So I have been working with Utah Policy, and this was a project that started around COVID and didn't quite get off the ground. Is we're working with Utah Policy to tell our story a little bit more. As you know, as electeds of different cities and towns, it's really difficult to get out your stories and your different challenges because each city has their own unique challenges. So what we'll be doing is we'll be working through Utah Policy by interviewing different members of the board and of cities about topics for each month. So the plan is to have a monthly topic and then highlight 3 different cities that have big differences in that topic. So it'll be probably a 15-minute interview with Holly Richardson, who is the editor of Utah Policy. And then that will be cut down to a 2-minute segment that will be featured in their daily newsletter. So some example topics I have is for the first month, we're planning on doing an intro to the league, what the league does, why membership in the league is valuable. So that'll include CAM and likely the executive board. The next month, I want to talk about planning a community. We'll talk about general plans and kind of how general plans can differ across different communities, challenges to providing services. I have one for small budgets and small staff. So for that one will be smaller cities and towns. We have gateways to recreation. What's it like being a gateway to the outdoors, whether you're bigger or smaller? Another one I was thinking was young versus old. We have cities that have a median population of 40, and we have a city that has a median population of 22. And how does that affect what kind of events you're providing and what kind of services you have? We'll do a budget month around June. So this is just an opportunity to show one size fits all, and also give people who read Utah Policy the chance to learn more about local politics, because oftentimes it's focused on national or just state level. So that's kind of the plan. If you have suggestions for topics, or if there's a topic I mentioned that you're like, that is my city, or this is a city within my region that I think could exhibit that topic really well, let me know. So it's more of an update and just kind of get your brains churning for who you might want to include on your interviews and things like that. And I'll be setting up the interview times.
I think that's a great idea, though. A lot of people are reading it now, and to bring that local aspect in is gonna be great.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thank you, Cassidy, for leading out on that project. And do you need volunteers today, or are we gonna do that electronically? What's your?
We'll do it electronically.
Okay, so we'll send a board follow-up email later this week. There'll be a request in there to basically sign up, and then we'll assign people where to go. We're still trying to coordinate meetings with the editorial boards of the Tribune and Deseret News, and we're trying to help tell our story. The only other couple items, Mayor Kufusi, I have in the executive director report is at the last meeting, we discussed having a rural liaison to the league officers. Nick, for purposes of my voice, will you just give a quick summary of where that ended up?
Yes, so we reached out to all of the folks on our board who would qualify as a rural or small community, and asked them to talk amongst themselves and see who they would like to appoint as a unofficial liaison to the executive board. Mayor Logan Monson served in this role previous year, and this group determined that Mayor Danya Jessup Hilldale will serve in this unofficial role as a liaison to the executive board. Cam's mentioned before what this liaison does. When there are opportunities to meet with the governor's staff or legislative leadership, those types of things, and we want to make sure that we have a rural perspective there. We'll invite them there, and then throughout the legislative session, I know you brought them in on some of the board officer calls as well. So that is what Mayor Jessup will do. And it's an unofficial position, so we don't need any sort of action here, or it's not a new board position. It's just kind of an arrangement. So that's more of an announcement than anything.
Perfect. Mayor Jessup, anything you'd like to add?
I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I always joke about being baptized by fire around here. And I think that's what this position will be also. Just dive in.
Well, thanks for your willingness to spend extra time, and thank you to Mayor Monson I really enjoyed having Mayor Monson's perspective last year. And again, the reason we're doing this is we represent a statewide organization. Our league officers spend a lot of time on your behalf right now because of just how the elections shook out. Our league officers go from Spanish Fork to Bountiful. So that's why we want to make sure we've got an additional perspective in those strategy meetings. I'll be coordinating with the league officers as that audit comes out. Right now, we do not have a board meeting scheduled in November. If for some reason we feel like we need to, and to respond to that audit, we'll let you know as soon as possible. We do have LPC on Monday, November 13th, and then that audit will be presented to legislative leadership on November 14th. So again, we'll coordinate with the officers on that. The last item in the report is the National League of Cities. There are two updates here. Number one, later this week, we will be hosting state league directors and senior staff from quite a few state leagues here at our office for a 24-hour basically retreat on housing and land use policies. You've heard me say multiple times, and those of you who've gone to NLC conferences have seen this, that the pressures we're facing here are similar to the pressures facing in our other state leagues. And so this was a brainchild that started a few months ago with me and a few other directors saying we really need to just find some time for all of us to strategize on what's working, what's not working. And, you start a brainstorm, next thing you know, you're hosting. So we'll be hosting them this Thursday and Friday. We're very excited about that.
Can you let us know, police officers, when would be a good time for us to drop by on that? There are some folks that I've met that I wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah, we will be doing a dinner, a work dinner Thursday evening, and then Friday is the hybrid event. So we'll have all total about 10 people here. We'll have another 25 or so online. We'll be here all Friday morning.
The all executive directors or some
I'm
of
the
the,
executive directors, so
some of the local.
I
state
think our
governments
league
like
staff,
them
yeah,
as
it's
well.
basically state league directors and then their version of Justin or Carson. Yeah, and again, about a third will be in person, 2/3 will be online, but we have state league participation from more than half the state leagues around the country. So we're excited about that. And then in November, the National League of Cities will have their annual convention. We always have we had really good, strong turnout for the DC conference in March. The turnout in November is usually a little smaller. So if anybody's planning on going, let us know because we'll be hosting state night and we just need to finalize our count. Mayor Shepherd, is there anything you'd like to add from the Housing Accelerator perspective?
Not yet. We'll meet and hopefully get a toolbox put together here at our next meeting in November. So.
Yeah, but that'll be part of the NLC convention in Atlanta. So I'll be there with a couple of league staffers. I want to point out that Katie applied for and was accepted to be part of the NLC staff that week. So she's going to be behind the scenes with NLC staff helping to orchestrate that conference. So we're excited. If she's on loan that week. Really helpful.
Sure that we know that. So this isn't representing everybody, but I actually will be presenting on Thursday in the pre-sessions, like on Thursday at 4:00 with Just Serve as part of the first ever global Just Serve cities. We're rolling out an initiative and awards. And anyway, so
At the National Holidays.
yeah.
And if anybody wants a consolation prize, if you can't go to NLC, you can come to Mill Creek on November 16th at 8 o'clock and we're gonna open the City Hall.
Oh, I hate to miss that.
You're gonna send that out?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I'll miss that, Mayor Silvestrini, but we'll be at the National League. So to summarize, the next board meeting is Monday, December 11th. That's when we'll present the annual audit. So you'll have that material for you in advance. We'll also present the preliminary approaches for membership dues that you'll approve in January. So you'll have a chance to consider in December, have a few weeks to chew on it, and then adopt it in January. And then we'll have whatever relevant policy updates there are. And again, stay tuned. If the officers feel like we need to meet as a board in anticipation of the audit, then we'll call a meeting as we get closer to that date. That's all I've got, Mayor Kuzi.
Great. With all that said, I will call for a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.